On the night of June 25, 2011, Lauren Giddens went out with a man. He wasn't her boyfriend, actually. He was her ex. So they hung out together during the night, and the next day, Lauren disappeared. But hold on. Don't jump to any investigative conclusions just yet. This is the kind of story that's going to stay in your mind, okay? For days. And before I start telling you all the details, I need to warn you about something. This case has disturbing details, okay? No, there's nothing sensationalized about it, it's just reality. I'm Marcos Campos, and today I'll share Lauren Giddens' story. Please like, comment, even an emoji, and join as a member if possible. And check that you're subscribed to the channel and that your notification bell is on. Help me reach 1 million subscribers. Do you think we can make it? That's it. Message delivered, let's get to the facts. Lauren was 27 years old and had just graduated in law. She was a lawyer. She was living in a building right next to the college where she completed her studies in Macon, Georgia. And at that point in her life, she was really focused, studying a lot so she could pass their bar exam. In the weeks before she disappeared, she had told her family that she was going to be off the radar for a while, you know? Focused on her studies, she didn't want to be disturbed or have people messaging her all the time about anything. She wanted to stay focused on studying. And maybe that's where there's a link in this chain. But after some time had passed, after she said she was studying, her sister Caitlin started to notice that something was wrong because she wasn't getting any good morning messages, no emojis, absolutely nothing. That was really unusual. So what did Caitlin, her sister, do? She started calling her friends, right? Hey, do you guys know anything about Lauren? Were you with her today? Do you know anything? And everyone answered no. It really seemed like she did what she said, disappeared off the radar. A friend of hers named Ashley then went to the house where she lived, the building, and she knew where Lauren kept a spare key. You know that thing about putting the key behind the flower pot under the doormat? Well, her friend went there, got it, and opened the door. When she went into the apartment, Lauren's books were on the table as if she had been studying right there. The keys, some keys were there too. Her purse was there and her car was in the building's garage. But Lauren, nothing, no sign of her, as if she had really vanished off the map. And then she thought, now what? Who can defend me, El Chapo? Of course it was the police. She called the police. The police got there really quickly, started searching the apartment, and they noticed that there were no signs of forced entry, no visible struggle. Everything was tidy, not even that kind of tidiness someone does to cover things up, You can tell when something's been arranged and isn't natural. The forensic experts there know this stuff and can tell just by looking, right? So what did the detective who arrived there in the next few hours, right after the missing person report, start to do? He called the forensic team and asked them to spray luminol in the bathroom. Look, the walls, the floor, the bathtub, everything lit up like crazy, showing that the bathroom was covered in blood. Invisible, of course, to the naked eye, but it was there. From that moment on, then, it was no longer a missing person case, right? So the police completely sealed off the place, the apartments, the surroundings, and started searching the whole area around the building, the perimeter, actually. And it was at that moment that literally a chance gust caught the investigators' attention. A breeze around the area they were searching changed direction and carried a smell. And then one of the detectives who was there noticed this smell. And guys, it's an unmistakable smell for anyone who's smelled it before. And it was coming from a trash can at the back of the building. The detective had already smelled that before and recognized it right away. So he went over there, already kind of knowing what it was, to check the trash can. When he opened it, Lauren Giddens' torso was wrapped in plastic inside. Just the torso, guys. No head, no arms, no legs. Obviously, now it was definitely a criminal investigation. A homicide had happened there, and the police now needed to find out who had done it. So they started piecing it together, connecting the clues in the case. The last time anyone saw Lauren alive was on the night of June 24th to 25th. She had gone out with a guy named Joe, her ex-boyfriend. So they spent the night together, apparently. He was then the last person to be with her. But there's always a but, isn't there? Joe wasn't the only man in Lauren's life at that time, okay? Other people were involved with her. There was also a guy named David who was her current boyfriend. And he was supposedly on a trip, a golf trip. Maybe he played golf. He was in California the weekend she disappeared, okay? Convenient, maybe? An alibi 3,000 kilometers away, right? What would you say? And the investigators, of course, looked deeper into their relationship, okay? Lauren and David's. What they found there was, I would say, complicated. David described their relationship, right? His relationship with Lauren was kind of fluid and ongoing. I don't know what he meant by that. Maybe it was kind of liquid. It comes and goes. So he also said that they had gone months with almost no contact, you know? That he pulled away when he felt some pressure for a commitment. Maybe Lauren told him, like, either we make this official, none of this fluid and continuous thing, or else, Kasarpa, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. So that's what he told the police, right? And that was pretty much it. And then, on the last night anyone saw Lauren, she had gone out with her ex, the one I mentioned to you, right? So I ask you, did David know about this? That his girlfriend was going out with her ex? Well, the case has barely started, and we already have some unusual pieces in this puzzle, don't you think? Well, if David knew that his girlfriend was going out with her ex, that was exactly what the investigators needed and wanted to find out. Well, while all of this was happening, the residents of the building where she lived, everyone was in shock there, right? After all, nothing like that had ever happened there, not in the area, let alone in the building. So the police started searching the apartments, interviewing one person here, another there. Everyone was questioned, and one of Lauren's neighbors specifically came forward to help from the very beginning. He was a guy named Steven. He was a pretty chill guy, kind of quiet. He kept to himself, but he told the investigators that he and Lauren were good friends. Steven even helped with the searches. He gave interviews on TV. He stayed around the whole time while the police were working. He really seemed like a shaken friend, you know? In shock, trying somehow to help the investigators. With whatever he could, after all, he lived there too. But at first he was just a guy really kind of scared by everything that happened. However, he also caught the investigators' attention for being a bit strange. But nothing more than that was said. After all, right? Strange? That's a relative thing, right? What is strange? The guy was just quiet, kept to himself? Let me give you a brief bio about him, okay? Steven was a lawyer. Like I told you, he was Lauren's colleague, more precisely her classmate. They studied together. And he lived in an apartment next to hers. So if we set that aside, the investigation said about the guy being kind of weird, kind of strange, everything really pointed to him being a good friend who was in shock. By the way, several people in the neighborhood were like that too. It wasn't just Stefanzinho. Check this out. The police wrote the guy's name in their investigation notebook. And life goes on. The focus at that moment, at least, was David, the boyfriend. Boyfriend? Why? There was something that came up during the investigation, okay? On the night of June 25th, Lauren sent an email to David, and he was in California. And in the email, she mentioned that 2 days earlier, she thought someone had tried to break into her apartment. So some questions come up, right? Based on all of this, everything I've told you so far. Think about it. Could it have been David himself who did this? Or maybe he had gone to Malcolm to check something? Didn't want to scare his ex? Could that golf trip I mentioned be a fabricated alibi? So many maybes, right? Maybe? Well, the investigators pulled everything, obviously. Travel records, credit card statements, testimonies. David was filmed in an interview and said he was really in California during that whole weekend of the disappearance, after the discovery of the torso, that his relationship with Lauren was complicated, as I already said. But he said he hadn't done any of that. So then, with those leads basically stalled, the police thought it was time to have a talk with Joe. The ex-boyfriend she had gone out with the night before the disappearance. Joe was interviewed as well. He was the last one to see Lauren, right? So the investigators looked closely at every detail about him, about that night before. But then, I'm sorry to tell you all, for those who were betting on either of them, both David and Joe were ruled out of the investigation. Apparently, they both had a solid alibi, okay? At least that's what the police released. And the police were left without an obvious suspect at that point, right? Boyfriend, ex-boyfriend. Who do you look at in a case like this, right? The disappearance of a young woman, a student, she lived alone. Then she went out with an ex, she had a current boyfriend, and it was a complicated relationship. It was pretty obvious they'd look there first. But then, both of them are ruled out by the investigation. And guys, obviously I need to point something out here. It's a word that doesn't really fit well in criminal matters, don't you think? Sometimes what's right in front of you ends up confusing things. But let's see what our tireless investigators found after that, okay? At this point in the story, with the boyfriend and ex-boyfriend completely ruled out, the investigators remembered a name they had written down in their investigation notebook. Does anyone remember him? That's right, him, Stephen McDaniel, the neighbor who's also a classmate. The one who stayed around the whole time. He gave a TV interview. The investigators called the guy in for a chat, to talk again, right? But this time, it was more like an interrogation. He wasn't just a witness anymore. What did you see, right? After all, guys, everything needs to be looked at carefully in a crime like this, right? Finding a torso inside a residential complex. Did the police miss something with that friend of hers in the first conversation? Well, there was something about his manner that didn't add up, let's say. One of the detectives described that Stephen McDaniel kept staring off into space between answers. It was like he was kind of calculating every word he was going to use before speaking. And at one point during the first interview, he even suggested that Lauren might have gone out for a run and been kidnapped by a stranger. I've seen this movie before. The guy trying to steer the investigation. What if she went out for a run and got kidnapped? Weird, isn't it? Really weird, and for an experienced investigator who's seen tons of cases like this, it's obvious. The guy was kind of trying to tell a seasoned investigator how to do his job. You know what I mean? But there was something more concrete. In Stephen's apartment, during the initial search, investigators found some condoms. And then they asked the guy about it, right? They said, "Stephen, why do you have so many condoms here, man?" And then he answered, "Okay." He said that he had broken into a couple of his colleagues' apartments while they were traveling abroad. He entered without permission using a master key he had for the building, and from each apartment he took a condom. When they asked him why, he said he was saving them for when he needed them, that he was a virgin, that he was just waiting, saving himself for marriage. Wow, things are getting strange, huh, my dear friends? Even though it was bizarre, his behavior was inappropriate when it comes to breaking into his friend's apartment, right? Totally illegal. Breaking into private property, jail, and in fact, that was enough for the police to arrest the guy for breaking and entering. Now, with him in custody, let's say the police had everything they needed to really dig deeper into Lauren's case to find out if this guy had anything to do with it or not. So the investigators went to Stephen's house once again, and what they found inside, honestly, could be straight out of a horror movie with the script already written. Ready? They found the packaging for a saw of a specific brand and size, a pair of panties with Lauren Giddens' DNA. That was inside his dresser. The investigators also found 2 keys. One was a master key for the building and the other was a custom-made key. The locksmith made it to open a single apartment in the building where they lived. Whoever guesses which apartment it is gets a treat. Of course, it's Lauren's apartment. They also found flash drives, and on those flash drives, there were disturbing files involving child sexual exploitation. That's proof he was pure evil, isn't it? In the building's laundry room, just a few meters from his apartment, they found the saw that matched the packaging found in his apartment, down to the size. And guess what? There was Lauren's blood on that saw. Later, they tested it and it matched. And then the investigators also found a memory card from one of Stephen's cameras. On that card, there were videos of Lauren filmed from outside her apartment window, like those obsessed guys who hide out there, you know, at night, watching. We've seen this in movies so many times, right? So creepy. Stephen had tied a camera to the end of a piece of wood like this, like a long stick with duct tape. And he would, you know, put that thing up to her window like this so he could film without her noticing. Like Hugh, you know? The strange things Hugh does that make us say, that's so unrealistic, that never happens. And Stephen is right there to prove it does. The prosecutor in the case later described all of this publicly, okay? He said they found deleted videos from Stephen that he used to watch Lauren's house. A complete kit, guys, of a dangerous lunatic disguised as a friend. And his computer history showed repeated searches for Lauren's name, okay? For her social media profile. And those searches happened at the same time he was looking up very violent pornography, sometimes even in the same browsing session. I don't even want to think about what that guy was doing on those browsers, you know? Disgusting as hell. Now, you know what's the most disturbing part, I'd say, about all of this? Lauren might have known that something was going on, right? Because do you remember that email she sent to David, her boyfriend, on the night of the 25th? On the night of the events. So it was in that email that she described that 2 days earlier she had already noticed that someone might have tried to break into her apartment. Besides that bizarre detail, she also told her sister weeks before that she felt like things in her apartment had been messed with. It seemed like someone broke in. Check this out. She called them the Macon Bandits, like she thought it was some, I don't know, some college kid or something, you know? A petty thief, something like that. She even said, "Oh, I think I'm overreacting." She was right without even realizing it, wasn't she? But the person who broke into her apartment and messed with her things, who even stayed outside her window with a camera as we saw, wasn't just some random stranger. It was a neighbor, her friend, a guy who went completely unnoticed by everyone, the same guy who took part in the search for her when she disappeared. The same one who gave an interview on TV saying that Lauren was very friendly, a one-of-a-kind person, that he was really upset, shocked. It's amazing how people wear masks, isn't it, guys? It's terrifying. But there's a detail about this guy's mask that I'll tell you about in a bit, okay? Keep that in mind. At the sentencing hearing for the case, the prosecutor revealed something, okay? College classmates of Stephen McDaniel told investigators that over the 3 years of college, he talked about the fantasy of committing the perfect crime. And they said it wasn't just once, okay? It was a recurring topic that he brought up all the time, like the guy was a lawyer and wanted to commit the perfect crime. If he was a good lawyer, maybe he was dangerous with that mindset. The prosecutor said the following: "It was an obsession for him. His dream was to commit a murder and get away with it. Look, I'll tell you, if it weren't for that stroke of luck, maybe he would have, you know?" Well, so when Stephen entered that apartment in the middle of the night, he was wearing a mask, gloves, with the apartment key that he had made himself, right? At a locksmith. It was around 4:30 in the morning, already June 26th. That wasn't an impulse, as we could already tell from everything I've said, right? It also wasn't a momentary anger over something. It was the fulfillment of a dream. Man, that's really bizarre, right? And there's a detail about that dream, okay? I'll tell you about it in a minute. But talking about the crime itself, he stood still in the dark room, watching Lauren sleep. But when he moved, maybe toward her to do something, he ended up making a noise and Lauren woke up. So she opened her eyes, got scared, yelled at him to get out of there, but he jumped on top of her. She fought back, but he strangled the girl with his own hands until she stopped moving, stopped breathing. Then he dragged the body to the bathroom and went back to his own apartment, and that day he just carried on. It was only the next night that he went back there with the saw. And then he dismembered the body right there in the bathtub. The torso was thrown in the trash, where a police officer noticed the smell and investigated. And the rest, you know, the head, arms, legs, were thrown into a dumpster that was supposedly behind the law school across the street. But that dumpster was picked up by the garbage truck before the police arrived that day, so Lauren's remains were never found, as far as we know. And it seems like he almost achieved his morbid dream, right? Because look, in 2014, almost 3 years later, McDaniel accepted a deal, okay? He signed a confession there. He got a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 2041. And the judge in the case, Howard Sims, called the crime truly monstrous. And at the hearing, Lauren's mother read a statement out loud, most likely directed at that lunatic. She said the following: "He tried to extinguish Lauren's light with the darkness he had, but he didn't even come close. There was also a friend of Lauren who went there to testify. She took the microphone at the hearing and addressed him. 'You are the devil.'" And McDaniel, not caring at all, just sat there looking down the whole time, didn't say a single word. But before I wrap up the story here, there's something you need to know, okay? The investigators themselves admitted that the confession probably didn't cover everything. The detective, especially Scott Chapman, who was involved in the whole investigation, said that he had plenty of time to prepare his confession. He said he was sure there was more, things he didn't tell anyone. I don't know if he was referring to possible previous crimes or speaking specifically about Lauren's case, but either way, with everything I've told you, you really can't trust this guy at all, right? What I think is that this guy is definitely going to take a lot of things to the grave, you know? And there's a detail in this whole case that stands out, which is the garbage truck. The investigator, that same guy Chapman, revealed years later that the discovery of Lauren's torso inside that trash bin was purely a matter of chance, like I said. Because the truck that picked up the trash from the building where it all happened was late that day. Can you believe it? If the truck hadn't been late, the bin would have been emptied there, and probably no one would have discovered the body. Just like what happened with the trash at the college, which was taken away and nobody ever found the parts. Yeah, guys, the guy who dreamed of the perfect crime almost pulled off a perfect crime. If it weren't for a fluke. That's really crazy, right? And there's one last thing here that I can't get out of my head in this story. Do you guys remember the interview Stephen McDaniel gave on TV on June 30th when the police were searching the building? The one where he said that Lauren was friendly, outgoing, that he was really worried about her? So check this out. In the middle of that interview, the reporter mentioned that a body had been found. At that moment, Stephen froze. You could even see the redness in his face fading, turning pale. His eyes widened and he whispered to the reporter, "Body? I think I need to sit down." And he sat right there on the floor in front of the camera without any shame. But for those who were watching from the outside, right, for most people who didn't understand the context I already explained, it looked like a friend who was devastated, right, by the news that the body of his friend, whom he cared about so much, had been found. But actually, guys, all of that was just his shock at having been found out. His perfect crime look went down the drain. That was the shock that made the guy turn pale. And this is actually the mask I told you about, remember? The guy's mask fell off. How is that even possible, right? Actually, he didn't manage to do it there, right? Because you can see the ins and outs, the psychological roots in the guy's mind. Because, like, if they hadn't found that body, he would have easily passed himself off as the poor, devastated friend. What I know, guys, is that Lauren's remains were not found, okay? There's a pink bench at Washington Park in Macon, and also a plaque at Mercer Law School, which is the college where she studied, with her name on it. She was only 27 years old, the oldest of 3 sisters, and the first in her family to go to college. And when she got to Macon in 2008, she and Stephen started at the same school in the same semester and moved into the same building. The scariest part is that to her, he was really a friend. She never even imagined who was actually on the other side of the wall of that apartment. Yeah, it's just another case that shows nobody really knows anything, right? People hide who they really are very well. Leave a comment here telling me what you thought about all this. Don't forget to subscribe, check your notification bell, help me reach my goal of hitting 1 million subscribers in 2026. Do you think I can make it? I don't know, but I'm hoping for it. Thanks for joining me. A kiss from the redhead. See you next episode.